Hi, I'm Macy.
And I'm Missy.
We're best friends
and business partners. And each week, we're going to bring you a quote that inspires us, and we're going to talk about it.
Join us as we break down our favorite impactful messages for leadership and share how you can apply them to lead with confidence and purpose.
Get ready for a fun and authentic journey into leadership, life, and everything in between.
Well, hey, bestie.
Hey, bestie. I'm happy to be here with you today, as always.
Yes, same.
This week, we have an incredible guest. He's such a special guy who is a success coach, a best-selling author, a speaker, and a fellow podcast host, and he is dedicated to personal development and leadership. And yes, I could say the list of what he has accomplished goes on and on and on, but we'll let him share more with us about himself in a minute. But welcome to the show, Brian Bartes. Woo-hoo!
Yes, Brian, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Missy and Macy. It's an honor to be here.
Well, you are going to be dropping some wisdom on our listeners, and we are so excited to really get into it. But before we share the quote that we're going to talk about this week, let our audience know a little bit more about you, Brian.
Sure. My professional background is actually in accounting and finance. When I was 23 years old, I had the opportunity, and it's amazing how things happen in life when you have these forks in the road and you move in one direction, and it ends up being an incredible blessing. And so for me, I became the chief financial officer of about $100 million company at the time in revenue.
At 23.
At 23,
wow.
It was I was ill-equipped probably for the opportunity, but they say that luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and I was definitely preparing. I was almost finishing my MBA in finance at the time, but really didn't have the experience probably to prepare me for a position like that. The good news is the company was growing in leaps and bounds, and everybody was trying to figure out how to grow and how the infrastructure could support that level of growth. And so it really gave me an opportunity to be part of that with some fresh thinking and fresh eyes. And we've grown to about $2 billion in revenue. So we've become a pretty large, successful company. And beyond that, I love personal and professional development. I've been writing and a little bit of speaking and coaching along the way, and trying to all the while grow myself and also grow others, really contribute to the success of other people and add value to others. It's great to be successful myself, and it's great to be successful yourself. But when you can contribute to the success of others, that's really a much greater blessing. And so I've been able to do that within our own family. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We're coming up on 36 years, which is just absolutely incredible. I don't know where the time has gone. And we have 4 grown children and one 2.5-year-old granddaughter. Her name is Charlie, and I actually got to enjoy some time with her just before we came on the air here. And we have 2 additional grandchildren on the way, another granddaughter and our first grandson. So we love our family. Thank you. It's super, super exciting. We go from 1 to 3 in just a few months, and we're super excited about that. We have a very close family. Our children are close with each other, and we're close with all of our children. And so for us, family is God and family are the 2 most important things, and everything else falls behind that. But I've been very blessed in life, blessed vocationally, blessed personally, and now I get to be on your podcast, which is super
which
wonderful.
Is a blessing to us and our listeners.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I
You're doing so
appreciate it.
many great things. I will tell you that Missy and I will never be chief financial officers because math and numbers are not our thing.
Yeah.
And we are just so thrilled to have you with us today. We're going to talk about this quote today. Success is never final. Failure is seldom fatal. It is courage that counts. That was said by Winston Churchill.
It's a good
So,
one.
Missy and Brian, let's talk about it. All right, Brian, we're going to start with you. There's a lot to unpack with this one. So, when you hear success is never final, failure, I say originally it was never fatal. I just like to seldom, right? Failure is seldom fatal. It is courage that counts. What do you think when you hear this one?
Well, there are a couple things packed into that. First of all, it's a great quote, and obviously Winston Churchill is one of the great leaders, not only of our time, but ever. And so when we talk about success and failure, I look at both of those as checkpoints along the way. And so sometimes people achieve success. Let's say an Olympic athlete who wins the gold medal in the Olympics. And for sometimes people who achieve significant accomplishments like that, that ends up being the pinnacle of their career and the pinnacle of life. I think one of the
Right.
stereotypes of that is the high school quarterback. And if you remember
Yes.
back to high school, the high school quarterback was the guy, right? He was the guy that every woman wanted to date and every guy wanted to be. And sometimes for that high school quarterback, that ends up being the pinnacle of that person's life. And so for the rest of their lives, they're known as the high school quarterback.
Yeah. Right.
And for me, no matter what level of success I've achieved or what specific accomplishment or however you measure success, it's just a stop along the way. And it's great. And I don't want to devalue it because it's wonderful when it happens and it's great. And we want to acknowledge that. We want to celebrate that. But we also want to understand that that's just a checkpoint along the way in life. And the same is true, by the way, of failure. And there are people who are destroyed sometimes by failure, whether it's a business
Right.
failure or a life failure, maybe a failed marriage or other relationships. And those people become defined by that. It makes such an indelible
Yes.
impression on them that it has a stronghold and they're unable to emerge from that. And so I think the first thing about success and failure is that neither of those is the end. It's just a checkpoint along the way.
Part of the
And
journey.
then, yes, absolutely. And courage is a huge part of what helps us to move through that, whether it's moving on from success. So what do you do after you've been to the moon, right? I've interviewed a NASA astronaut, and after you've been to the moon, there isn't much bigger on Earth that can happen, but we don't want to be defined by that. We want to recognize that that's just a point in life. And again, a business failure or any kind of failure is an example of that. And so courage helps us to move through both of those.
Yeah, I love what you said about it just being a stopping point. I think so many times people really do define themselves by their failures, more so, I think, than successes, right? Like people will talk about their successes as things that happen in their life, but the failures define people. And I think the way great leaders can help folks on their team or in their families or in their community is just to continually ask them, but what did you learn?
Yeah.
Like, don't let it define you. What did you learn from this? What can you take from it so that you could do great things? Miss, what would you say about the quote?
So I agree with both of you, but the part of this quote that stands out to me so just like glaringly is it's the courage that counts. And you were beginning to kind of step toward that, Brian, toward the end of your kind of take on the quote. But when you think about success and failure, and they are just part of the journey, they're two sides of that same coin. And it would be so easy to sit and rest in that success. But it takes courage to think, what's next? It takes courage to say, I'm going to get up and dust myself off and keep moving on when I've had a failure or a perceived failure. But it's you got to have the courage to move beyond today. And when you don't, you're stuck, and being stuck stinks. And so I think this is a great equation. How about this, Mayce? Since we're with a math genius here, to a great equation to keep moving forward and experiencing life.
Yeah, I love it. One of the things, Brian, that we love so much about what you do is that you believe in taking action. And a lot of people, whether they're successful or they're focusing on their failures, like Missy said, they do get stuck. They get stuck in their success, or they could get stuck in their failures. What do you think, about the part of the quote that says, failure is seldom fatal? Meaning, can you share an experience where maybe someone looking from the outside in looked at that and said, wow, that was really a failure. But how did that for you turn into a significant learning opportunity?
Good question, Mayce.
Thank you.
It's a great question. How much time do we have? Because I could talk for the rest of the day about failures that I've had and thoughts that I've had around those failures that have held me back temporarily. I've had an experience very early in life that for me was a seminal moment that has shaped me ever since. And I was just 9 years old. It's amazing the things we remember and things that impact us. And I wonder, like, if I asked my mother about the experience, she probably wouldn't even remember it. But I certainly do. I was 9 years old. And just to give you a little bit of context, I grew up, so I live in the Detroit area now in southeastern Michigan. I grew up about 100 miles north of here in a city called Saginaw. At the time, it was about population of about 100,000 people. And I'm the oldest of 4 children, so grew up in a decent sized family and in a middle-class family, middle-class neighborhood. We lived in a 975 square foot house and with 4 kids and no basement. And in those days, kids played outside. So now today, everything is structured. We have appointments for everything. Moms and dads. Play dates, that's right. Moms and dads drive around in minivans, courting their kids to wherever they need to go to the next practice, sometimes eating, going from one practice to another. But in those days, a lot of what we did was just outside play. And so as a 9-year-old boy, I had played baseball, and we played baseball in our front yard and in the backyard and in the street. And when a car came, we'd have to get out of the street and then we'd go back into the street. And our parents would have us go outside and we'd go in for dinner and then we'd go back outside and stay out until the street lights went on.
That's right.
And then we'd go home. And that's sort of how I grew up. And I loved baseball. And we did so soccer wasn't big. My siblings actually all played soccer, but it didn't come into the picture until after we moved out of this neighborhood. And so I didn't play soccer, but I played baseball. And as a 9-year-old, you played t-ball. So there was 11 and under Little League, 13 and under Little League. And then if you were 9 or 8 or maybe 7, but probably 8 or 9, you played t-ball. And we had tryouts. And so again, that's different from today. Today, everybody gets on the team and everybody gets a trophy.
Right.
But back in those days, we actually had tryouts even for t-ball. And you can imagine how excited I was as a baseball player, played with the neighborhood kids, and many of them were older than me, and thought I was pretty good. And I went out and tried for t-ball. And I remember this as vividly as if it happened last weekend. And the tryouts, I think, were Saturday and Sunday. And then on Monday, the coach of the t-ball team was the PE instructor at school. So on Monday after school, this is in early June at the end of the school year, he would post the list of players who made the team.
Sure. I have anxiety about this because, Brian, one thing you may or may not know, like Missy and I are not sports girls at all. So like my palms are sweating.
I know. I'm into finding out what happened.
Well, and so I was really excited. Tryouts went very well both days. And of course, we're going through the school day on Monday, and all the kids who had tried out are probably thinking more about that list and going to see that they had made the team after school was over.
Right.
And I remember, and again, I can picture it, just walking very fastly. You couldn't run down the hall, but walking very fast and very quickly, and seeing the list posted on the door outside the PE teacher's office. And I ran up, and there were other kids. And I started from the top of the list and went down the list, and my name wasn't at the top of the list. And I got down to the middle, and my name wasn't there. And I went all the way through the list of about 15 names, and my name wasn't on the paper. And at first I was confused. I thought, surely this must be a mistake. And I looked, is this the 9 and under T-ball team that I had tried out for over the weekend? And long story, a little bit shorter, I didn't make the T-ball team. And so you can imagine, as a 9-year-old boy who loved baseball, used to watch the Tigers. I never went to a Tigers game at that point, but loved baseball, followed baseball very closely. And I didn't even make the T-ball team. And when I remember the feeling, this was 50 years ago. This is what an indelible impression it made on me.
Yeah.
I felt like a failure. So it wasn't an event that happened that didn't go like I had planned for it to go. I felt like an absolute failure. I was embarrassed because my friends were around me who had made the team.
Yes.
I was demoralized. I thought it was the worst of it. How can you not make the T-ball team? How can I not make the T-ball team?
Right.
And so I went back and I told my friends, and there's a little side lesson about surrounding yourself with success and having people around you who support you, because I went to my friends, and you could see very easily where those friends would have mocked me or laughed, and they didn't do any of that. What my friends said, a couple of whom were 12 and 13 years old, was they said, you know what? Forget and they probably used some kind of expletive even as a 12 or 13-year-old. Forget the T-ball team. Why don't you come out and try out for our little league team? And it was not the 11 and under little league team. It was the 13 and under little league team. And so I did just that. The name of the team was Knepper's Standard, and Knepper's Standard was a gas station in the neighborhood. And I tried out for the team. I made the team, and actually played on that team for 2 or 3 years after that with my friends. And I had so much more fun playing real baseball than I would have hitting a ball off a tee. And I played second base and then became a catcher. And there are so many lessons packed into that. And
there sure are.
Looking back, it really taught me everything that I need to know and have needed to know and have used for years and years after that, about getting back up after falling short, about reframing failure, about resilience, and maybe most importantly, Missy and Mayce, that sometimes the outcomes we hope for don't come to pass because something greater is waiting for us.
That's the one. That was the one that resonated with me the most, because I think there's so many people in this world, like when they get told no, or they don't make the team, or they don't get the promotion, or whatever the case may be, that failure, again, going back to the defining moment, those failures define. But I also love, Brian, so much what you said about the people that you surrounded yourself, because you're right. You could have had kids that say, ha ha, you didn't make the team, you weren't good enough. Go cry to mommy, or whatever kids say at that age, right? And then because you had the right people, they're like, forget that team. Like, come join the better team. Come play on a team with us. Let's have more fun. Like, the outcome was so much greater for 2 reasons. One, because it's the true outcome that God had designed for you, but you had the right people. And I think that both of those things are such important, at least for me, like pen and paper, taking notes. Those 2 really spoke loudly to me,
and
those lessons.
I would say, we've all had experiences like that. I mean, the 3 of us, I'm sure every single person listening in this moment, we've all had that moment of failure that we thought literally like might take us out.
Sure.
But we're here to tell the tale. I feel like I was listening to Brian tell a movie as he was sharing that. So I want to ask you, Brian, because we know that on the other side of failure is usually something better. We know that it's the mistakes and the failures that make us. Why do you think so many people are afraid of failing when it really is what causes us to move along that journey that we talked about and experience success?
Hey, bestie, can I be real about something? Leadership can feel lonely, doesn't it?
It can, especially when you're the one that everyone else is looking to for answers, but you've got questions of your own.
But we have a solution. We created Impactful Messages, a community for those who are built to lead.
It's a private space where real leaders can connect, grow, and get practical insight to lead with purpose.
That's right. There's no fluff, just real talk, real tools, and real people who, well, they get it.
That's right. And so if you're looking for leadership people, then this is your group. Come join us at www.inspiredpeopleinspirepeople.com.
Yeah, I think people are afraid to fail because failure feels so personal. Right. So I was explaining when I didn't make the T-ball team, and it wasn't for me at the time. Now I know this years later, and you know this intellectually, we navigate through things differently than I certainly did as a 9-year-old. I didn't have any context at that point. I didn't see it as a neutral event, and where I was able to attach the meaning to it. It felt very personal, and I felt like a failure and felt
That's
very
good.
bad about that. And so I think that holds us back. Rather than seeing failure as a learning lesson, we tend to not look at it as a neutral outcome, but rather we feel like if I fail, then I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And the important shift and we've made this, right? So the two of you and I navigate through things, through failure, through events that don't go as I wanted them to. I navigate through it very differently today. But the important shift to make in our thinking, I think, is to see a failed attempt as a teacher, not a verdict. Like you said, once we separate our identity from our outcomes, that frees us up to accelerate the pace of motion, and we can start growing faster. So it doesn't hold us back anymore. I think it was Napoleon Hill who said every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit, right? It was Hill. That. And so when we look at it that way, then we fail our way to success. So when we hit a failure, then we know that that's just a stop along the way. And it doesn't hold us back. It actually propels us because we know we're one step closer to success. We know that intellectually. When we're in the midst of it, sometimes it's hard.
It's painful.
And we have to pull ourselves out of that, pull ourselves up to 10,000 feet where we can look at it and evaluate it and say, hey, this isn't about me. It's just something that happened. And it's something that we can learn from, and we can use that to then propel us to success.
Yes. So let me ask you this, Brian, because it is a mindset thing, right? And people who have done the work, like the three of us, like we know that, right? We're realistic about it. We know that things are much clearer, of course, in the rear view mirror than when you're looking through the windshield. So are there any practical steps that you can think of that our listeners can use to build resilience, to embrace this courage, to really help them overcome the failures quicker, or to at least help them overcome this resistance that so many people have to failure, so that they don't have to waste all this time in what Missy and I like to call the middle, right? Like that middle part is the yuckiest part. So what can you advise people to do to get them through the middle faster?
Well, I think it's a little bit like weightlifting. So we don't we can't expect to go to the gym once and have look like Mr. Universe if you're a man, or whatever the equivalent is for like a woman bodybuilder, right? It takes time, and it happens through consistent effort. And so this is really a process. It's not a pill that we can take that all of a sudden we no longer have fear. If we didn't have fear at all, or if we didn't have anxiety, I would be very concerned about that. So just even though I approach things differently, even though the two of you approach things differently, you still might go into a situation with a little, maybe butterflies, or if I'm giving a talk, I have butterflies, I just do. And what happens is you get on stage and the butterflies fall away. But if I ever went to step on the stage and I wasn't feeling, whether it's nervous excitement or a little bit of anxiety, and I'm not talking about fear, where I just am afraid to step on the stage, but just a little bit of anxiety, I would be concerned about that.
Sure.
But just like you develop physical strength through lifting weights repeatedly over time, this is how we overcome fear and anxiety and develop that courage. Developing courage is like developing the muscles. And so when we step outside our comfort zone and try things and push our limits, we can learn from our successes, but we can also learn from our failures. And in terms of practical steps and getting specifically to your question, one thing that's really worked for me, and something that I encourage my coaching clients and others to do, is to do something that scares you. Mm. And so as I think about how I've used that as a tool to overcome fear, to overcome fear of failure, to overcome sometimes it's fear of success. For me, it's been things like extreme things like skydiving, bungee jumping, scuba diving at night, because scuba diving during the day apparently isn't enough. And a couple years ago, I actually ran with the bulls in Pamplona, Spain.
Oh my gosh!
And after and maybe we have some adrenaline junkies who love to jump out of planes, and
that would not be Macy or me.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. Maybe we can help you get over some of your fears. But the thing about that, and you don't need to go to extremes, and I'll taper it down a little bit in a minute. But after you've survived experiences like those, you're much better equipped to muster the courage you need to get through much less harrowing challenges, if that makes sense.
And we know, right, that courage, like when you take action, or courage allows you to take greater action than not take action, right? So, but we're not running with bulls, Brian. We're not riding bikes. We're not doing any of those things. We'll sit at our desk and we'll be courageous somehow.
Well, but we can also start smaller and just take a risk that stretches us, right?
Yes.
So someone once said, do the thing that you fear, and the death of fear is certain. So if you fear public speaking, you know that the way to get over that is to go out and speak publicly, to do it. And over time, it won't be as scary, and you build that muscle, the metaphorical muscle, you build that resilience, and you build the courage. And then finally, through all of it, always work on reframing failure as feedback. And just remember that falling short of your desired outcomes is information. It's not condemnation. You're not a failure when an event occurs. It's an opportunity to learn from that event and then move on from it.
So good.
Yeah, I love it.
So good.
So as we wrap up for today, will you share with us, Brian, like a leadership lesson or something that you didn't learn in a course or in a training, right? The three of us love personal development. We love taking courses. We love reading books. We love doing all the things. But what's something that you learned, a lesson that you learned only through experience, not a course, not a book, not a training?
There are a lot of them. I think most of the leadership lessons we learn on the battlefield, right? We learn in our organizations, we learn in our families, we learn in our companies or wherever we have an opportunity to lead. One of the most important lessons that I learned through experience is and I certainly didn't learn this in business school, is to hire the very best people you can find and then get out of your way. I used to think that I needed to be the smartest person in the room.
So good.
And great leaders know that if they're, and I know today that if I'm even close to being the smartest person in the room, then I'm in the wrong room. And
Amen.
so leaders, instead of trying to be the smartest person, they surround themselves with smart, capable, driven individuals. They hire great people whose strengths complement their own, hopefully. So I'm a finance person. Maybe I don't need to hire a finance person. I need to hire somebody like you, outgoing, gregarious salespeople who can sell product or whatever it is that I'm hiring for. And the best hires I've ever made, though, I'm absolutely certain about this, are people who are much smarter than me. And once they come on board, I don't need to tell them what to do. I don't need to tell them how to do the thing that they already know how to do. And so instead, I can focus on empowering them by giving them support, resources, trust, and room to grow. And I've learned that leadership, as it relates to people on our teams, is really about unleashing talent. And when you support people in doing what they do best, you don't just get better results, you create a culture of autonomy and a culture of ownership. And so the best leaders I've met know that their job isn't to have all the answers or to do all the work. It's to build a strong team by hiring great people that can propel their company or their organizations to achieve success faster and easier and with greater predictability than they could on their own.
So
love.
Good. That is something that Macy and I teach and preach when we are with organizations and we're training. So great share. Well, listeners, it's time to segue into our big takeaway for the week. If you only take one thing from this episode, let it be this. In the journey of life and leadership, both success and failure are fleeting. The applause fades, the setbacks are going to pass. But what defines us is not the height of our victories and not the defeat that we have or the depths of the defeats, but how we respond. We are to remember that true growth begins when we stop seeing success as a destination and failure as the end. And we instead embrace both as feedback, not finality. We are always becoming.
Yes,
I was about to get to preaching again.
Yeah, it's so true. Because
I was going to say, honestly, preach, Missy. Let's go.
What really does endure through the highs and lows is courage, right?
Yes.
It's not loud. It's not flashy. Courage is often quiet. When you show up, you do the work, you choose growth over comfort. Courage is that thing that's going to carry us forward when things are uncertain and what will help us rise when we begin to fall. And we know that courage is a skill that can be cultivated. And it's one of the most essential skills as leaders we need to have if we want to keep moving and growing and becoming who we're meant to be, because without courage, we just stop. And with it, we evolve.
So good. I feel like I've nodded my head. This is like, as you guys just nodded.
Through that.
So
like
much.
Bobbleheads.
Yes. Brian, you have been amazing today. Thank you so much for joining us. If our listeners want to stay in touch with you, how can they do that?
There are a couple ways. One is social media. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn are probably the two best media to find me. And my name's not John Smith, so it's easy to find. Brian Bartes. My Instagram handle is actually Brian E. Bartes, I think, but at any rate, you can find me just by searching my name. In terms of my podcast, Life Excellence with Brian Bartes, you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can find the video version on YouTube. And you can also go to my website, brianbartes.com. And if you go there, we have a free book that you can download. I think it's $12 or something on Amazon, but you can get the PDF version for free, and it's called Coach Yourself for Success. It's a book that I wrote for people who wanted to learn and grow and take their lives to the next level, but they weren't ready to invest in coaching. And so there are lots of tools and techniques and strategies that you can use. And whether you're a seasoned personal and professional development person, or you're just new to that game, I think you'll find some great tips and strategies in that book.
Thank you. And of course, we'll put all of that in our show notes for our listeners.
Yes. And as we wrap up, Brian, we ask all of our guests this one question. What is your favorite leadership quote?
Wow. That's a great question. There's so many.
Brian has a whole book on quotes.
I know he does. That's why it's hard for him to pick just one, because he wrote the book.
That's right.
Ronald Reagan said a great leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. A great leader is the one who gets people to do the greatest things.
So
love that. Love that.
Yeah, what I love about that quote is it captures the essence of leadership as influence rather than achievement.
Yes, love it.
So good.
Well, listeners, we want to hear from you too. Do you have a favorite leadership quote? Send it our way, and we might spotlight it on a future episode.
We'll be back next week with another quote and more leadership insights. And you know what we're going to do? We're gonna talk about it. Bye, Brian.
Bestie.
Bye, Bestie. Thank you so much.
Bye, Brian.
Thanks, Mayce. Thanks, Missy. It's been great. What an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this show, please show us some love by clicking the 3 dots to download the podcast, leave us a 5-star rating on your podcast app, and talk about it with other leaders to help them find the show from any of the major podcast apps. We'd love for you to follow us on social media too. Mpactful with an M _ messages on Instagram, and Mpactful Messages on LinkedIn.